One of the questions people ask me all the time is, what is transformation? And it's a shift in being. Now, that can sound a little bit mysterious because what is this being stuff? And the way I like to get into it is to talk about the power of context. And you can think about context just in an everyday sense when, certain words have different contexts. Depending on the tone of your delivery, it could have a different context. So context provides the meaningful space for whatever you're saying or whatever the situation is. We all know that a wedding is a certain kind of a context, and usually people are quite open and joyful, and a funeral, well, that would be a different context, and people are more quiet and subdued, of course, and respectful. So context is very important and very powerful, and usually we're tuned into context quite naturally. We get immersed in it and we learn it, and we naturally figure out how to be appropriate depending on what the context is. Now, it gets a little bit more philosophical, I suppose, when you expand from a localized context to, let's say, the context of a country or a region of the world. And then you could even expand further to the context of human being itself. Now that becomes really interesting and really exciting for a guy like me, and I love exploring that and researching that. Well, this is where transformation comes in, because a lot of people think that they'll change their life if they change their circumstances. And that could be anything from changing something about your appearance to changing your job or changing a relationship. And all of that is fine and sometimes great and exciting. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But transformation is a different kind of change. And with transformation, you're shifting who you are. You're altering the space in which who you are can show up, you might say. Now, we can't change the fact that we're human beings, of course, and we have this biology and we have this way of thinking, and we have our language, of course, and there's a lot of what it means to be human that's just hardwired in that we can't shift. This idea of being, which I'll explain, that might be one of the things that we can shift if we understand what that means. And I think being is essentially, it lives in language. Being lives in language, and it's very connected to meaning, and we create meaning through language. Imagine that, yes, you have yourself, you have your body, you have your characteristics of your physical features and all of that, but underneath that, there's something we call the self, and I believe that that's largely made up of narrative, story. All of that exists in language. And I sometimes say to my participants or invite them to think about other animals, for example. And if you look at a deer in the woods of upstate New York, it's pretty much the same as a deer in California or wherever you may be. There's nothing really. They don't show up differently because they don't have the language that we have. So of course human beings are different all around the world and different over the course of history, because why? we create different stories. We create different realities based on the stories that we tell. And what happens is the stories that we create, we forget that they're stories, and they become the truth. They become the way it is. And then a lot of times people get stuck with that, and they could be living into a story that was created when they were a kid, or even was a part of their family before they were even born, or certainly was a part of their country for 100 years before they were born, or if it's China, it could be going back thousands of years. But they're still stories. They're still stories. They're not the absolute truth. So when a person has the opportunity to transform their life, what that means is they get to take a stand and declare a new reality for themselves, because they can use their voice, they can use their will, they can use their commitment, and they can create a new context out of which to live their life. Now, if you look at what might be a way to describe the context of human being that maybe crosses over all cultures and perhaps all human beings. And I think we learn a lot from somebody like Darwin, who didn't just study human beings, really, he studied all life. But what did he come up with? Well, he said, look, all life wants to survive. And thank you for that. I mean, it's a good instinct to have, of course. But for human beings, because of these stories that we tell ourselves, and one of our greatest stories is that there's a me that's predetermined, and there's this me that I can't change. That's one of our deepest stories that people get stuck with. And because we have this me that we're attached to, I think we expand the Darwinian survival to what I call social survival, which we're all familiar with. And again, there's nothing really wrong with that. However, if it's the only game in town, so to speak, then it shapes your whole life. It clouds your whole life, and it's going to kind of infuse itself into all areas of your life. The way I break that down to sort of everyday simple terms is this. I think in general, in my experience of traveling the world and also looking at myself and also the research of the great thinkers, I think most people, they spend their life almost obsessed with avoiding 4 things. Check this out. They want to avoid being wrong, right? Who likes to be wrong? In fact, think about how much you love to be right. And I notice, again, in myself, I notice with the people I work with, the people in my classes, they love to be right. And perhaps even more than being right, they just don't want to be wrong. And it feels maybe kind of like dying in a way, and sometimes people will push away love, they'll push away success, all for the sake of avoiding being wrong. And then another one is avoiding failure. Well, again, I mean, you might be listening to this saying, well, yeah, I don't want to fail, which again, I understand, but think about it. If you're so concerned with failing, then you may not strive for greatness. You may not take leaps that you might take if you weren't so concerned with failure. And as we all know from sports or business or the performing arts, you got to be willing to fail. And in fact, a lot of the people that write the autobiographies in the bookstore, almost all of them are half of the story is their story of failure, and they had to go through that journey of failure before they could achieve their greatness. So failure, nobody likes it, I understand, but it also could be a great gift. And I think it's one of these, as I say, these stories that we just get swept up into, and we just sort of assume that it has to be avoided at all costs. The other one is being embarrassed. Nobody likes to be embarrassed. And then kind of connected to that, my fourth one is being rejected. Nobody likes being embarrassed and or rejected, and a lot of times those go together. And if you think about it, there you are, and you have the opportunity to perform, let's say. And I don't know, maybe at the extreme case, you have a chance to sing in public. And a lot of people get quite worried about that, and maybe you can imagine yourself standing up there on the stage with the microphone in your hand, and what might you be experiencing? And I wouldn't doubt it if your stomach might be a little bit queasy, and you might start feeling hot, and your face is sort of hot, and you might even panic a little bit. And why is all that happening? You know, has a tiger entered the hall and is going to attack everybody? No. Is there really any threat to you? Is there really any danger to your life? No. It's just we don't want to look bad. You know, we don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to look foolish, let's say. And we turn that into something that's just so terrible that for many of us, we won't even get up on the stage. We won't go for our dreams. And it's unfortunate because, as maybe you've experienced or a lot of people experience, when you finally do get up on the stage and you start singing, or we could just use that as a metaphor. When you're singing your song, so to speak, it's usually fun, and you feel more alive and engaged, and you're so thankful you did it. But the key is getting up there and doing it. So transformation is incredibly powerful, because imagine it like this. My hand right here, let's say that represents the range of options that's available to you in life. Because if your context is survival, if underneath the surface, it's not something you have to really think about or remind yourself of. It just becomes taken for granted. So if survival, if my hand represents I have to survive socially, my reputation, my image, my identity has to be protected at all costs. If that's the plane of existence upon which you take all your actions, then all your actions, all your results, all your relationships, your internal experience is going to be influenced by this range of options. Well, what if you could add a whole other dimension to your range of options? So nobody wants to get rid of survival. I mean, we need to survive on occasion, and it's a worthy goal, But we want more than that too. So transformation's like adding another plane of existence, another plane of possibility to your life. And it's a whole new range of options available to you. And what it requires is, first of all, you gotta face your commitment to survival and kind of be with that and embrace that, recognize that, and look into it and experience it. There's no quick way out of it. You gotta go into it. You know, it's kind of the, what do they say in philosophy? So sort of the dark journey of the soul a little bit, and that could sound scary, but you know what? It's not really anything to be scared of. In fact, if you go through it, you end up on the other side much more free and open, and what you thought was so scary is really not that big of a deal anymore. So that's transformation. It's shifting your being. It's shifting your range of possibilities. And it's available to anybody at any time if they're committed to doing the work.